Welcome to the conference. Thank you for inviting me. And my talk is longer than 10 minutes because I was told I had 20 minutes because it's a plenary session plus questions. So we'll take advantage of that. Organic versus GMOs. Organic agriculture versus genetically modified organisms. Are these two agricultural technologies destined for coexistence, or are they going to be in conflict? This is a case study I bring you from Australia about two neighbours in conflict. Michael Baxter, who planted GM canola, and Steve Marsh, who was an organic farmer, and his neighbour. A few days ago, I boarded my plane to travel to Europe, and I was greeted with this message. I thought, wow, what an interesting message, be part of the future. Today's presentation, please realise, is about the fight for the future, about imagined futures. And what future are we imagining? And that is the question. Interestingly, when I walked down that air bridge, the answer was there. We will all fly organic, according to this message. It wasn't my message. The fight for GMOs and against GMOs is a fight for the shape of the future. The case study I will share with you is from Australia. Australia, as you see here, is mostly desert. So we have a lot of desert, all of the central area. And there's a green belt around the edges, down the east coast, all of Tasmania, and in the southwest. The events in the case of Marsh and Baxter, the GMO farmer and the organic farmer, occur in the southwest, the corner that I've circled there. And this is the wheat belt of Western Australia. The region is renowned for wheat and sheep and has been that way for a long time. Not only wheat and sheep, you may see some native Australian wildlife. Do you have many of these in Bulgaria?
No, we don't have that.
What is this? What is this?
Some navel, something like this. Emu.
Emu, exactly. This is an emu. It's native to Australia. Now, the case of Marsh and Baxter is one battleground of a bigger worldwide conflict. Let us look at some context. Firstly, I'll look at GMO agriculture briefly. I will look at organic agriculture briefly, and then we'll get to the specifics of this case. GMO technology, as you know, is a contested technology. The contest is essentially a conflict of corporates versus consumers between a few big corporate pesticide companies pushing for the uptake of GMOs and a multitude of consumers who are pushing back against GMOs. There are at least 7 areas of contestation. Should we allow patents over living organisms? Is it okay for pesticide companies to control our food supply for corporate profit? There's the dubious doctrine of substantial equivalence, where the claim is for getting a patent because of the difference, and then the parallel claim of sameness, and that sameness is the basis of a claim for exempting this technology from the scrutiny that it might otherwise receive. There's the fight to have GM products labelled. Then there's the issue of the impacts of GMOs on health, ecology and environment. They're uncertain and will remain uncertain for generations. I'm asking a question here, are GMOs the new cane toads of Australia and the world? Cane toads seemed like a good idea at the time for Australia, backed by science, but when things go awry, there may be no recall. Anyone here from Europe? Anyone here is from Europe? Anyone here is from Europe? A few people from Europe? Anyone from Europe? Good, thank you. So you see that Europe is making good progress, has been very steady in its resistance to GMOs, and in a lot of ways has led the way for the world in its resistance to GMOs. Nevertheless, that resistance is achieving uneven results. Anyone here from Bulgaria? Anyone from Bulgaria? Anybody come from Bulgaria? A few people? Here in Bulgaria, I'm happy to report that Bulgaria is GMO free. So there are no GMOs grown in Bulgaria. Congratulations. Now in Australia, the situation is much more muddy. There is a gene technology regulator. It's a federal agency. Australia is a federation. Now the federal agency has approved GM cotton and GM canola. Each state has nevertheless taken its own position on these approvals. And 2 states, Tasmania and South Australia, have very strong moratoria in place. And the rest have either no moratoria or they have compromised moratoria. So in this case, WA has the moratorium, but it allows GM canola and cotton. And that's the basis of this conflict that I will share with you. Now, let's have a quick look at GMOs globally. GMOs is a technology that had very limited uptake. 5 countries account for 90% of GMO plantings. North and South America together account for 85% of GMO plantings. There is 4 crops, and 4 GMO crops account for 99% of the plantings: soy, corn, cotton, and canola. And the marsh backs the case is about this one here, 5%, the canola. It's claimed that 25% of the world's canola is GM canola. Let's briefly look at organic agriculture. It's a much more widely distributed agricultural technology. 162 countries report annually certified organic farming statistics. This is a density equalizing map, and it means the bigger the area, the more certified organic hectares there are. And you see that Australia is the way here, Europe is very well represented, and Africa is fading away here. Australia accounts for 40% of the world's certified organic agriculture, and is followed by Argentina, USA, China, and Spain. Australia, as you see, is a world leader for organics. 40% of the world's organic hectares are in Australia, but you see it's a very small player in terms of GMOs, just 0.3% of the world. And if we can compare this to Bulgaria, we see that Bulgaria has 20.22% of the world's organic hectares. So there's lots of room for improvement here, but this is a good result, in my opinion, that Bulgaria has 0 GMOs. Now let's look at Australia specifically. These brown markers show the GMO farms and silos this year in Australia as identified by one of our NGOs. These brown markers here. This map shows local councils which have opposed GMOs, and their situation, their statement is that they exclude GMOs from their region, and you see there's the predominance of those in WA. This map shows reported GM contamination events, and you see that 5 states have reported contamination events. This map shows current trial sites, so this technology is actively pursuing the Australian market. So the red are current trial sites of GMOs, and the yellow buttons are post-harvest monitoring sites to see if these GMOs have escaped from the test area. And as with all of the maps of Australia, you notice that the agriculture is around the beach, not in the desert. Now to Kojonup. Now Kojonup is in the southwest corner, as you see there, of Australia. It is about 3 hours drive from Perth. It's a small rural town, a population of about 2,000 people, and it services the regional agricultural community, which is the basis of the surrounding area. Kojonup is about 260 kilometres from Perth, the capital city of WA. The land, as you see, is flat and dry. The rainfall is adequate for cereals, low by your standards probably. The winter is reliably wet for growing and the summer is reliably dry for harvesting, so it's a good climate for cereals. The wheat yields are in line with the low rainfall and so they're lower than international averages. Grain production in this area has been an important economic activity since the land was first settled by Europeans in the 1830s. And here is our organic farmer. This is Steve Marsh. Steve and his wife farm wheat, oats, rye, spelt and sheep. They do it organically, a little outside of Podgernay. And their farm is labelled organic. It's common knowledge that this farm is organic. And this is a neighbour, and this neighbour has planted GM canola. And Baxter, Michael Baxter plants cereals, crops, sheep and canola. And here he is standing in a canola field. These are the two farms. On the left is the GM farm and on the right is the organic farm. What I want you to know is this pink boundary there. That boundary is 3.6 kilometres, about 3.6 kilometres. And it's along that boundary that the GM canola was planted. And so Baxter planted GM canola here, he planted GM canola here. His intention was to plant it here as well, but in the end he planted non-GM canola, and he said this was because he ran out of GM seed. This is GM canola. Before 2010, the story really begins in 2010 when this canola was planted. Before 2010, it was not legal to grow in WA this GM canola. Canola was used for cooking oil, as you see here, and it may be labelled in the shop, non-GM, as you see here. Now there's a question, why did Baxter plant his GM canola on the boundary, given that he had a big farm? Why did he plant it on the boundary? Well, the questions remain, was it malicious? Was it foolhardy? Was it reckless? Was it provocative? Was it threatening? Was it stupid? Or was it sound business practice? Now, I'm going to leave the answer to that question to you, but perhaps it was all of the above. Anyway, what happened? Once that canola was planted here, it blew across this boundary and contaminated all of this area here, which was 70% of the organic farm. So 70% of the organic farm was LEED certified. Also in 2010. The timeline was this. What allowed this to happen was in 2003, the regulator said you could grow GM canola, but the WA government put a moratorium straight away against that to stop it. However, there was a change of government, as that's what happens with governments change. Marsh warns Baxter that if he planted GM canola, it would jeopardise his certification. The exemption is lifted as was expected, and then Baxter immediately plants canola. He swaths it, and we'll get on to the implications of swathing. It's a harvesting method, and we'll get on to what the significance was. They played a lot of court time played out about the swathing. Anyway, the result was that Marsh finds seeds, pods, and stalks in his fields. He loses his organic certification again. It's in 2010. He sues Baxter. The case is heard. It's heard for over 12 days, and there are currently 2 appeals. The appeals have been run, and we are waiting results. There's been popular support for the organic farmer. On the other hand, the Farmers and Graziers Association supported the farmer, the GM farmer. There's 4 elements to this case: nuisance, negligence, injunction, and damages. Nuisance, that these events were a nuisance to Marsh. Negligence, that Baxter was negligent. This is the claim. Injunction, to ask the court to stop Baxter's future behaviour. And damages, that Baxter pay Marsh for losses incurred due to decertification, because, as you know, organic product is worth more than non-organic product. The harvesting method, as I mentioned, is significant because For every canola crop that Baxter had previously planted, he had directed it. So he'd gone in with the harvester and collected the seeds and they were gone out of the paddock. But for the GM canola, he did something different. What he did is he cut the stalks off. He let them drop in the paddock. He herbicided the whole paddock, including the swaths obviously, and he windrowed those swaths. And he left them there. So this is a pile of stalks and seed pods and seeds of GM canola that he left in his paddock for 3.5 weeks. And that will explain, I think, why we have all this contamination. So the wind has blown all this material across onto the organic farm. The judge stated that there were 245 GM canola swaths found on the organic farm. So the facts in general in this case are not in dispute. They blew 1.2 kilometres into the organic farm, so a long way. Now the farmer said this is contamination, the certifier said this is contamination. The parties agreed there was no genetic contamination because marsh was not growing canola. And the judge declared, well, rather than contamination, this is an incursion. So this created great difficulty in proving nuisance. So to prove nuisance, you need some kind of interference in the loss of enjoyment and use of the land. And the judge declared that to not be the case. Negligence, to prove negligence, you need really nuisance and carelessness. And so if you fail on a nuisance claim, you almost certainly will fail on a negligence claim. An injunction, well, the injunction request was for a 2 kilometre buffer. So a long distance between, you planted your GM over here, my organic farm is here, let's have 2 kilometres. That was a retreat down to 1.5 and a retreat down to 1 before eventually a retreat down to 0. And then they just asked for no swathing. This, and it's over to us, it's over to you, right? There was no empirical evidence presented in this case, and on that issue it failed. The damages, now the damages were agreed to be 60,000 euro in euro terms. So this was agreed between the parties, and that was to account for the loss of organic certification. Now, when the judgment was made, it came back, nuisance was failed, negligence failed, injunction failed, and the damages failed. The Baxters had a trip to New Zealand paid for by Monsanto, the provider of the GM canola. So the judgment was no on all counts, but then it got worse because the judge awarded costs to the GM farmer, and the costs were 570,000 euro. So 10 times the amount of damages requested. So the stakes are now very high. The big picture is really Monsanto versus the world, and the small picture is that a farmer may lose his farm, may have to go bankrupt. The Marshes appealed the case. They also appealed the awarded costs. And that was held 2 months ago. So there were hearings 2 months ago. The responses in that 2 months have been that the government has asked for the tolerance to GMO be changed from 0 to 0.9%. That was rejected. There have been 2 appeals, and we're waiting the results. And one certifier has suggested that we relax the contamination rules against GMOs, and that's also to be decided. Consumer groups have asked for a reinstatement of the moratorium and to reverse the GM canola. This is Stephen's to Marsh of the appeals. They of course hopeful because they don't want to lose their farm. Popular support was demonstrated at the Supreme Court. Now the legal costs now amount to about, in total, by my estimation, 1.4 million euro, approaching in rough terms 1.5 million euros. So the game is quite a big game now. I'm going to summarise. This is where the case stands. A resolution, we have none. The time expended has been 6 years. The money expended has been about 1.5 million euro. Monsanto should be smiling at this stage. The organic sector is probably rather sad at this stage. Certification has been restored, so that's a good part of the story. GMOs on the boundary, there's none, a good part of the story. Damages, none are recovered. Injunction, there is no prospect of an injunction at this stage. 2 appeals, we're waiting the results. Bankruptcy is possible, and the overall message is mutual coexistence, well, it's not demonstrated. Thank you. And we have time for a few questions.
Yes.
Questions?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much for your nice presentation. From my own point of view, and as far as economic is concerned, GMO will be the future. So we all know about side effects on health, but economically speaking, GMO will be much cheaper than organic farming. That's my own point of view. Although we know the hazards and the side effects on health, I don't know if you agree or not with me. I would like to listen to final or your own point of view.
All right. Well, I would dispute the economics. I mean, we don't want to all have the same point of view, because if we all have the same point of view, there's no point in coming together, right? So we want to have different points of view. My point of view is different to yours. In particular, the economics don't stack up for GMOs. I hear that you say we have these doubts about the health. I have the doubts about the health. I don't agree that there's an economic case stacking up for GMOs, because the economic case stacks up for Monsanto because they have patents over this technology. So every time somebody plants it, they dream off some money. So that takes the control away from the farmer. The GM canola is worth, if you go to sell it in the market, it's worth less. The non-GM canola is worth so much more, and the organic canola is worth so much more again. What that's telling us is the market wants organic. The market will settle for non-GM, and the market does not want, if they have the choice, and if they have the knowledge, they don't want GMO. This is my opinion.
The other thing, actually, we need more research on the side effects on the genetically side of the human being, genome. I think, yes, it will take time, but it's worthwhile doing. Thank you very much.
Yes, I agree. I read in my book that to nod is to disagree in Bulgarian, and to shake the head is to agree. So I better not do either one of those. I think, I agree with you, of course. We want more research. The problem with research for GMOs is if you are taking a position antagonistic to GMOs, you are very unlikely to get funded. And if then you try to publish it, you will very unlikely get it published, right? So there is money. I agree with you. There's money involved, and this is about money. This is about control, and that's not the best place for agriculture to proceed, in my opinion. Another question. Thank you.
Thank you for your very good talking. I would like to talk about nutrition. Now we don't care about money. Is it a high cost or low cost or something like that? Now we care about nutritional value. If we are talking about canola, so canola we know very well as GMO. You change from saturated to unsaturated or omega-3 or something like that. I would like to ask, organic canola or GM canola, which one is more nutritive value than other?
Which one is
more nutritive value than other?
Okay. You need to mix up the question about nutritive value with pesticide residues. Now, the advantage to the farmer of the GM canola is you can spray it with glyphosate as much as you want, which means there will be more residual glyphosate in there, and it's recently been declared as a probable carcinogen.
But is it safe?
Is it safe? Well, nobody's saying it's safe, right? And the data is still coming in, but there's lots of data to put a question mark over glyphosate. And and it's the WHO has recently declared glyphosate is a probable carcinogen.
Right. Okay, thank you, sir.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, do you have any other questions or comments, please? If you have any other questions, please raise your hand. Any other questions, please? Thank you very much for your presentation.